Hey folks, thanks for coming out. Right before we get started here, I want to introduce you to a cool tool we're going to use for this panel. This is called Poll Everywhere. And if you go to pollev.com, that's POLLEV.com/Nick Stevens, you can access this cool little interface that is going to allow you to ask questions. So all the questions for this panel is going to go through here. And whenever somebody adds a question on there, it'll pop up on here, and you can upvote other people's questions, and that way I'll just kind of feed questions as they come in to our panelists, and we can keep things smooth and simple that way. So feel free to dive in and start putting some questions on there, and we'll get started in just a couple more seconds. Yeah, also, I will just remind you of the code of conduct. Don't add anything up there. But this is anonymous, which is cool in the sense that
that always works with the internet.
If you feel free to ask questions that might be challenging in some way, as long as they're appropriate for the workplace. All right, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. So my name is Nick Stevens, and I manage software engineering for Native Roots. And over the past couple of years, I've kind of been transitioning through individual contributor into management roles. And one of the things that became really obvious to me during this time is that the same skill set that you need as an individual contributor doesn't exactly help you as a leader sometimes. And so that transition can be pretty tough because people aren't logical, even though oftentimes we think we are. And so you have to kind of develop a new skill set. So with us here today are 5 awesome panelists who have kind of gone through that transition, some back and forth again and had very varying careers. But I'll go ahead and introduce them. They're going to be kind of our guides through this today. So let me start here with Kyle, sitting right next to me. Kyle is an educator, business dork, and software developer. He's a lead instructor at the Flatiron School and former faculty director at Galvanize and the executive director of Develop Denver. He holds a master's degree in engineering management. Next to him is Kristina Kemmer. Kristina has been an engineering director at Zapier. All right. For the past 4 months. Prior to that, she was an engineering manager at Envision for 2 years. And before Envision, she was at ReadyTalk, where she started as a product owner, shifted into technical product management, and eventually managed multiple engineering teams. Her career started at Boeing, where she had the opportunity to work with partners building the pieces that made up the 787 Dreamliner. Kristina and her wife have 3 daughters and 2 dogs, but she finds time for running, reading, and catching live music every once in a while. And then next we have Mr. Steve Kinney. Steve is a senior principal engineer and front-end architect at Twilio. He's an organizer of Dinosaur.js, author of Electron in Action, and instructor at Front-End Masters. Previously, he was the founding director of the front-end engineering program at the Turing School of Software and Design. Then we have Morgan Whaley. Morgan is a Colorado native who's been developing for the web since 2011. She currently works as a senior UI architect at Charter and has been involved in non-managerial leadership for the past 3 years. She loves TypeScript, good design, mindfulness, mountain bikes, whiskey, the outdoors, and swearing. You can tell by your t-shirt today. Sean Goodpasture, after being paid for his ability to code in most popular languages, Sean finally realized that code wasn't the problem. Sean first thought it was the technology and business strategies that were lacking, but after helping a lot of clients and a few startups, he learned that good strategy didn't actually make things better. It took one of his best friends leaving his company to get him to realize that the problem was him, the leadership. And since that time, his vision and passion is making sure everyone in technology has a great work experience. And Sean is a practice area lead at Solid. So kind of a round of applause for our panelists real quick. All right, so I love this. We got a bunch of questions rolling in. So we're going to start here with the one up top. So folks, and we'll just kind of jump in as you feel like you want to, and I'll pass the mic to you. But we just got a new top, so this is going to be interesting. So how do you manage meeting hell and actually get stuff done?
By and large, I don't schedule them, I don't go to them. True story. So, well, the way that we accomplish a lot of the things that would normally be done in meetings is we have a brief morning meeting and we have a brief end of the day meeting, and that's kind of it. And if you do that every day, you kind of never need the big meeting. And then when we do need to have a bunch of people get together, and we do need meetings or something, we'll be very mindful of like, do all the people on this invite actually need to be at this meeting? And I think it really helps too if you phrase every meeting agenda in terms of questions that need to be answered. And so like there's a victory condition, like you know when the meeting is over. And then other than that, like always be ending the meeting. Because it's one of the most expensive things you can do in your organization. And as that question heavily implies, like it's not terribly productive time. Meeting isn't getting something done. And so teams that I run, we tend to be a little meeting anemic as a result. And that's why I solved that problem. Yes.
Yeah, so a little bit of background context. The UX design team that I work with went basically from everyone being ad hoc and self-managing to trying to implement some kind of little agile process, which meant that people went from no meetings to literally all the fucking meetings all the time. And so the thing that I found with the team was basically, as someone who stepped in who had a background in agile, to say, always question the meeting, question the value of it. Don't be afraid to iterate on if a certain meeting cadence isn't working. And then also, like, I've just straight up left meetings. And I've encouraged other people to do it. Like, if it's not relevant to you and you don't want to be that person who's just on your laptop working through the meeting, then just go, hey, listen, I've got something else I need to get going on. If anything comes up, just like send me a recap later and then just get out of the room. I have told people to do that. It's gotten mixed results. I think part of it is in the delivery and how you do it. If you just stand up and walk out without a word, it tends to piss people off. And then not talk about it later. And then the other thing that I do personally is I will just arbitrarily block off 30 and 60-minute slots on my calendar for work time, and people will think that I have meetings, because if I block off 4 hours, they're gonna know like, oh, she's just got work time, I'm just gonna schedule something on top of that. But if I schedule it off in little chunks, then it looks like I'm way busier than I am, and then I just go to a different part of my building and hide there, and then no one can find me and make me do things.
I was actually gonna say the same thing. I block my calendar most of the time, just to make sure that people don't override it. I decline meetings that don't have an agenda. In general, what happens is you get a meeting invite and it doesn't have an agenda, that meeting will ramble, and you'll have no definition of done. So I'll push back for newer people with scheduling it, saying, hey, do you have an agenda? What's the definition? Who all needs to be there? And if there's like 30 or 40 people on the invite, I tend to not show up, because I'm not really required at that point. If I'm required, they'll hunt me down, and maybe they can find me. Just protect the calendar. That's the hardest part.
Yeah, those giant meetings, they'll like, if something important happens in them, somebody will tell you, but it's usually not something important. Yes.
So what was the most difficult learning you acquired during your transition into people leadership?
I think humans are hard. They're the hardest problem you'll ever have to solve, and you'll never solve it. And that was a super hard transition for me. But it is also the most interesting problem to solve. So to kind of challenges, things like that. But also that being a manager, being a leader doesn't mean you're the smartest person in the room. It shouldn't be. You should recognize that like there's other people sitting in the room that are going to have better answers, or going to have a different perspective, and your job is to draw that out and to make sure that that comes out into the discussion or into the decision, because if you're the smartest person in the room, then everybody's looking at you like that you're the bottleneck and that's it, and trying to let that go is a big thing. But impactful.
I think the first biggest thing is like it's like a foundational principle of the internet, which is why wasn't I consulted? Like just making sure that everyone feels like they've gotten the ability to like have input, right? Like because the second you don't do that, like alienation is one of those things that happens very quietly, right? Like when you've like we can all like lean back on like titles and shit, but like at the end of the day, if you've lost trust, it's game over, right? And so like one way to keep trust is make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to voice their opinion. And like it almost like is counterintuitive to like meeting held, but sometimes it is like we're gonna have a meeting where everyone gets to like say their thing, right? Like and like you know speak their truth and stuff like that. And like making sure that everyone has the opportunity to do that is like foundational, and I think I sucked at that for a while.
So, like 8 times out of 10, when you get promoted into a management position, it's because you were super good at your IC job. And like, it's the whole point of this panel is like those two things don't really have much to do with each other. And I think of it as high-performing individual contributors like tend to be dopamine addicts. Like you just get addicted to winning and achieving and accomplishing. And the thing that changes when you move into a leadership role is you need to kind of rewire your brain to get that same sense of accomplishment through other people's achievements. And so you need to start like letting go of your need to do everything. And usually where that stops is like, hey, you got promoted, you're a hotshot developer or something like that. Like delegating tasks to people that can't do it as well as you is a really hard thing to let go of. You go, if I was doing this, I'd be doing a better job. And that may be true, but like the entire point is that across all of the people that you lead, like you can collectively get so much more done than your high achieving ass could on your own. And I think that like another part of that is you need to let those people have their dopamine hits from winning. And so you need to give them ownership. They need to feel like they're getting things done. And it's really easy as a high performer when you move into that role to like rob your team of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like a lot of leadership is just a daily confrontation with existential dread. Because like no, like when you're I see man, you get that ticket across the you move it, you drag it, and like it fucking went deployed. You're like fuck yeah. Right? And then like I joke like when I have to do like what I do in the last 6 months, I can like write that out, right? But like stand up is terrifying. What did I do yesterday? I don't fucking right. I was sat in meetings. I did one like I will do one thing in the next like 3 weeks that will like be impactful. But yesterday, yes, I got day job. But 2 days ago, you can open bar, dude. It's that kind of like that weird existential dread that you don't get that dopamine, and it's terrifying. It's horrible. I need dopamine.
Awesome. So can you share some experiences with managing a remote team or being a remote leader while your team is centralized elsewhere? Remote leaders, cool.
Rule number 1, don't do it. If you can avoid it, don't do it. Seriously, it's really, really hard. Because trust is typically driven by being close to somebody and learning about them and feeling really empathetic and sharing experiences. You don't really have that if you're remote. I know there's a lot of remote workers. I worked remote for 18 months, led teams. It was incredibly difficult. So try and be connected as much as possible. Slack and things like that make it easier, but it's not perfect. So try and be close. And don't make everything business. Don't make everything, how's it going? Don't make it just stand-ups. Make time for the small talk that you would normally get in the office. Try and do it some other ways. With some of the teams I've worked with, we've done like basically a video chat open all day long and just make sure we can see each other's face. It's not around ask and see time as much as it is just be aware that someone's got something going on. And actually, when people share something like that to build a camaraderie, celebrate that they're sharing something and being vulnerable about what's going on in their life and make it part of it. The other aspect is there are people who want to work remote, they don't really want to share, and that's okay too. Don't force them to do the kumbaya. So just If someone wants to do that, great. If they don't want to do that, that's okay too. But find that real balance, and if you can, once a quarter, once a year, whenever, get everybody together and go do some crap together. I don't care if it's go build a raft or if it's go hiking or biking or just go to Disney World together. Just go get some shared experience, because that retouching is really important. Where we work, we have remote teams that work, and what we've said is that every 6 weeks or so, you get out of sync, and every 6 weeks we need to bring the teams back together to get back in sync again. Even though you're working on the same stuff, you forget that there's a human on the other end of that telephone or that Slack channel, something like that. So just keep that in mind.
So I love working remote. So I'll challenge that. I love working remote. I love leading remote teams. It's significantly easier if everyone is remote, because then everybody's on the same playing field. If you have a team or parts of teams that are co-located, you start to get sort of, humans are community-minded people, they're social animals, and so they tend to do the us versus them with like an office in Denver and an office in Atlanta, right? They'll start to kind of separate themselves, and that's kind of the worst case scenario. But if you can get everyone working remotely, it's all in the same playing field. I think the human touch, super important. So meeting hell, like video chat becomes your best friend. You get over the awkwardness of being on video and seeing yourself on video if you're on video all day. So people start to talk to each other as they would in an in-room environment. But still getting together, there's nothing that replaces that. So at Zapier, we get together twice a year as a whole company. And it's an entire week, and most of that week is actually just bonding stuff. It's like going to baseball games, it's hanging out, it's day drinking, it's going running, doing whatever, because you don't get that. So to do that for a week, to see people how tall they actually are. It's amazing that you realize that, like, oh my God, you were so much taller than I thought I was in person. That's always what the first thing people say, but it's so key. But it's sort of like you build those bonds that carries you over for the 3 months or the 6 months. And you see how teams start to react differently with each other remotely then. You see them understand, like, oh, now I know where you're coming from, or now I understand your style, your cadence, how you're talking through Slack, I can hear your voice, And so those pieces are super important, but it's a fun challenge to lead remote teams. If you have a chance to do it, I would do it, because it's this different sort of, layer on top of it that I like, so.
All remote is definitely easier.
Yeah.
When you have, if I'm remote and my team is together, there's definitely an us versus them that shows up. So it's incumbent on me to go find them, basically.
Can I ask a follow-up real quick? What's your experience with dealing with other managers while you're remote? Dealing with other managers while you're remote, so not specifically your team, but
like your peers.
Yeah.
So what's been super interesting, what I found at Envision that is completely remote, also Zapier is completely remote. It was so important to build a community between the EMs, between the managers. Management is isolating in and of itself. It can be isolating. You go from being on a team of people that are sort of building things together to being like, okay, I'm this person in this separate role. And no matter how good your relationship is, it's still an otherness, So that community of other managers is so important. In a remote environment, 20,000 times more important, because it can be super isolating. And it's almost like this gut check of I'm not crazy, right? This is happening, or this seemed weird, or just a sounding board. So we would do at Envision, it was kind of funny, before we had kind of just management team meetings, the EMs would get together almost on the side and just meet together, because we were we have to talk to each other. We have to build this relationship or do whatever. And so doing that, you doing that as a leader with your peers, super important. Don't wait for anybody else to do it. You go reach out and build that relationship, because it'll save you in your career. So.
If we have another spare battery, I think the microphone might be going out. Tips on working on self-confidence and imposter syndrome to become a better leader.
Is day drinking a valid answer?
Always.
I think it's So the CEO of SendGrid, formerly the CEO of SendGrid, has this thing of like servant leadership, right? And the first time he said it, I'm like, cute. That's neat, right? It sounded like one of those very nice things that you say to like get a bunch of buy-in. And then I realized that later on, like, no, this is a secret fucking ninja hack, right? Like, he's actually figured it out, right? Which is this idea of like, I think we said this earlier, which is like, there's a tendency to think that you should, when you were in IC, it was like, hey, I'm a badass at shipping code. Like, that's not important anymore. And there's this like thing where you think you need to be the best, but like, what if your job was just to actually like serve that team, right? It becomes like incredibly clarifying on what you do tomorrow, right? Like, oh, it's like I don't have to have all the answers. I don't have to like. My job is to unblock them and serve them, right? And like, it started as like one of those like I assumed that he had read some business book in an airport, and then I realized that like no, but once you have that framework, it like makes it very easy. Like you don't have to worry about imposter syndrome because your job is simply to help, right? And like you just basically reshift the frame on that completely and avoid it. Cheat.
When,
Good.
So I'm not a people manager now. I hate the term thought leader. If someone has a better term for not a manager who's still considered a leader, someone tweet it at me because I don't know what to call it. Or
Meat
just
space
scream.
influencer.
Yes, thank you, guys. Get it on a business card. Yeah. So at my last job, I was transitioning into being a meat space influencer, and
Someone tweet that.
please, for the love of God. So I had always been intimidated by leadership and management by my bosses. They seemed to have it together way more than I now realize I gave them I gave them way too much credit in a good way. When I got involved with the RANDS Slack group, which is about leadership in mostly tech and design, and I got to see the conversations people were having of like, I had a direct report cry in a meeting. I don't know what to do with this. Does anyone have any advice? Or, hey, one of my kids is super sick all the time and I haven't been in the office a lot and my boss is getting shitty, so what do I do? And I realized, oh my gosh, they go through the exact same problems that an IC does. It's just that their effects cascade out a whole lot more into the meat space. And so that actually helped with imposter syndrome a lot, and it helped remove some mental barriers that I had in starting to step up. And now my personal philosophy and everything is ask for forgiveness, not permission. If I'm ever in an environment where I have to ask permission to do anything, fuck that place, I'm gonna get out. I just go do stuff, and just doing things is what has helped me get over imposter syndrome at every step of my career, from the transition from design into tech, from tech into leadership, from leadership back into UX design. Every step of the way has just been get out of my own head and get out of my own way and just start doing things. And even if there's no long game, like I just stepped up and ran a 2-day silent auction in my office for a fundraiser. No one asked me to. I was just like, hey, there's a need. I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to run with it. And I got thank you emails. I didn't get what the hell are you doing? Stop doing that emails. And every time that happens, it validates this opinion that really there are like all these pockets and all these holes, just waiting for someone to kind of like step up and fill those gaps. And every time you do it, it's just like building up muscle memory. It gets easier and easier every time.
I think it helps to remember, to just remind yourself that you didn't hire yourself for this position. And if you didn't like misconstrue your experience or your abilities, like you don't need to, if you are actually unable to do that role, like that's not your fault. You didn't pick yourself for it. And so I think when I took over at Galvanize, that was one of the things, is I imposter syndrome pretty hard on that. And that was one of the things I was telling myself, was like, hey, like I didn't lie on my resume. And so if you can't do this, then that's not really on me.
How do you manage people whose work you don't understand? So an example of this would be a former front end managing a DevOps.
So I have a product background. I don't have an engineering background, and I'm a director of engineering. So I live this every single day. But I think it actually, I like to think of it as a little bit of a leg up because I don't have the sort of pull or desire to get in there and say like, oh, I could do this better. I can't. And so there's automatically sort of this stepping away. But it is super, super important for me to have empathy and understanding as far as what it means to be an engineer and how that can be done really well, how that can be a really shitty experience, and how to create a space that makes it a great experience. I have to have systems thinking. I have to understand architecture. I have to understand how things fit together. Because if I don't have that, then I'm not able to kind of help them think through a problem, help them ask the right questions, give them the right context as far as making that decision. So there's definitely stuff that I have to level up on that's not necessarily in my background, but you don't have to be the expert to be the manager or to be the leader. There's a different piece that's being brought to the table. And so I have a manager right now who's an excellent back-end engineer. That was his career. He's managing front-end engineers, and he's like, I don't know how to even talk to them. And I'm like, well, how do you talk to your other engineers? Like, what do you talk about? Are you talking about lines of code? That's not your role. Like, don't do that. He's like, no, I'm not. And I'm like, well, okay, well, what are you talking to them about? Their career, where they want to go? If you have feedback for them, if they acted like an asshole at a meeting and you need to tell them that, like, those are the topics that are brought up. If they have a technical challenge that they're running up against, ask them a lot of questions. Start asking them a lot of questions to see if they can find the answer themselves. If not, you know a ton of people in this organization, go point them to the right person to go talk to. You don't have to be the one that has the answer to every question that somebody reports to you has, but you can connect them with the right people. So I think about it like that.
So I actually a lot of times say that my computer science degree hurts me because when people bring me problems, I go immediately into problem solver mode. So I think the most important thing to remember is just asking good questions. Most people have probably heard like rubber ducky debugging. Sometimes you're the rubber ducky. Your folks probably know the answer, they're not confident in it, or they haven't really thought too much about it or thought about all the different ways. So systems thinking and applying even different things, just asking, being okay asking the dumb question. Hey, this is a dumb question. Why can't we glue Angular 1 and Angular 2 together? I don't know what the problem is. I'm just making something up. That's terrible, actually. That's a real example, so don't judge me. Actually, I know the answer. Maybe my computer science degree is a problem. So the reality is that as you move up the ladder, you'll be managing people that aren't technologists. And so if you're a technologist and you're trying to manage somebody who's not a technologist, managing other technologists is frankly easier than managing non-technologists. Now in my role, I'm working with business analysts and product managers and process people, and that's really, really hard. So I have to do the ask questions and learn from them and be really vulnerable about saying, I'm not familiar with Six Sigma, I'm not familiar with that acronym you just used, ask the question. They don't understand, they don't know that you don't know their domain. And actually by giving them the opportunity to speak to you about the thing they're passionate about, it builds a lot of trust and rapport, and your vulnerability actually makes them trust you more because they know how you're thinking, they know what you're concerned about, and they know that you care about them. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's an opportunity for you to build a team that really respects you by being open, honest, and not invincible.
I'll stop using the mic, it's actually more distracting.
It's distracting when we speak too.
It's the batteries in the dying.
Let's just, we're all loud.
Yeah.
I was treating it more like a talking stick anyway.
He has the conch.
All right, I want to hear some good stories on this next one. What's the biggest mistake you've made as a leader, and what did you learn from it?
Biggest, that's a pretty tall bar.
The contenders.
I bounce payroll.
Ooh.
If you ever want to lose your team really fast, that's a good one.
One that I made was I hired somebody without consulting my team, and it was just an instant loss of trust. Because historically, they had consulted on every hire, but it was one of those opportunities where like, all right, I have budget today. I don't trust that I'm going to have that budget tomorrow. I'm just going to go. And I pulled the trigger on somebody without talking to the team. And then I had to have 400 one-on-ones to like just absorb the rage and like that lack of trust. And it took a long time to build it back.
Was it a good hire or a bad hire?
It was a good hire. But like, they were all very clear. It's like, that's not the point. Is that you always ask us when you hire somebody and you didn't this time, and like, that's a breach of trust.
I think like just the cascading effect of a bad hire though is like
God,
easily bouncing payroll and making a bad hire, like slam dunk the worst 2 mistakes you can make.
Absolutely.
Easily.
Well, and see, the weird thing about that is that bad hire can take a lot of shapes, because I remember a bad hire that like, it was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, but it wasn't my team. And so I was like, all right, I don't think you should hire that person, but I guess it's your choice. Until I took over that person's team, and that was actually my problem.
Yeah, that's the name of my autobiography.
To come full circle, an excess of day drinking
Yes.
one time was a mistake. But when I was all of 26 years old was the actual one time I managed people for 6 months at a printing company in Commerce City. And an employee physically hit another employee in my presence.
Yay!
And I didn't tell anyone about it for 2 weeks. It happened right in front of me, and then I didn't talk about it. And I can justify, like, I was young, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I let it go. And at that point, then the recourse for that action was drastically different than if I called it out in the moment and it turned into both individuals getting put on a performance improvement plan that I had to manage, and the guy who hit the other guy actually not getting fired, which was mind-blowing. And the fallout from that for the team was bad, and for me it was so bad that I was going home on Fridays and having panic attacks over what I was going to have to walk into Monday morning.
How do you know you should look into leadership versus doubling down and becoming a better IC?
I see them as one and the same.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I did. I just stepped up as a really strong IC at my last job and told my boss that I was tired of spending 40 hours a week in code, and I wanted to find out what the team and the company cared about and try to multiply that effect out. And then they started sending me to DC and Dallas and India to train teams and go do cool shit and like influence the meat space and change the way that, no, it's not. And change the way that we like interviewed and hired candidates and all these different things. And then that turned into me getting basically like a double promotion when I interviewed for my next role, which is the role I currently have at Charter, where I don't have direct reports, but I've been through the same leadership training as all the managers, and I have the clout to kind of do whatever I want at my company within reason, and not really, I just have to tell my boss what I'm doing, and sometimes I just do that way after the fact, and everyone's like, that's fine, whatever, just go do the thing.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, which is there like, I mean, we work in an industry where everyone's a senior engineer by 25. So like there becomes this like, oh, I wanna get promoted, and like at a certain point, like there's always like, do I want to go into leadership or not? But like at a certain point, like there's no choice, right? Like I think being a badass IC and being a leader are ultimately the same thing, right? Of like, can you get shit done more than just the rate that your fingers can move on a keyboard, right? And like you can do that in your IC role, and then eventually like you tend to get promoted because you don't listen to other people. So like, maybe we'll just let them talk. Right. a group of people forward, right? Like, because there is a hard limit on like how much you can have individually, like how much influence you can have individually. Like at a certain point, you need to start actually like figuring out like social dynamics and like moving a team like forward to get like real stuff done. Like turns out like most things that we all work on are not worked on by one person in a garage somewhere. People like here's a quick summary of 6,000 years of human history. We do more shit together, right? And like figuring out how to move a team forward, like you kind of end up there accidentally. I don't like. Has anyone in this panel like made the decision? So you made the choice.
Yeah, it's around dopamine. Like
Yeah.
I stopped getting. It's like the heroin addiction to a degree, right? You need more and more heroin to get the dopamine just by slinging code.
Mhm.
And then I realized that because of the complexity of dealing with humans and the variability, and really focusing on myself and trying to become an expert again in something new, that I get more dopamine now with less effort almost, because it's not less effort, it's just because I'm still on the learning path of being a good leader. So I'm getting the dopamine differently, and I made the decision now. I actually, if I have to go write code for professionally, if I do it for fun, great, I'll learn something that's awesome. But if I have to do it professionally, I probably made a mistake. And I don't take joy from that, and that's okay for me. It may not be okay for everybody else, that's all right. But I've learned now that I actually get the joy from seeing my folks smile, be successful, and really deliver things, and they're so excited about what they want to come tell me. And that to me is how I get my joy now, and that's really important. So I had to make that decision, but that's for me. Otherwise, I would still be stuck in this weird limbo land, which I think is actually one of the questions up here. So,
Well, and there's a different feel-good chemical that you get from like bringing something out of other people. It's oxytocin. And oxytocin also makes you feel really good, but isn't addictive, and so you don't get the dopamine treadmill. Oxytocin can also extinguish dopamine addiction. And so that's one of the things that can make you feel happy and fulfilled without like constant dopamine treadmill.
So we're all a bunch of junkies.
Goddamn right.
I do think one thing just to add, because definitely plus one to everything set up here, but I think the question was around when do you know you're ready for like probably like people management versus technical leadership. I think it's just what you want to do day to day. Just think about what you want to do and how you want to spend your time day to day, because it is absolutely true as your career progresses in the technical leadership, you have to start getting work done through others. You have to start kind of pulling people together more. It's not just you. So either way, those are very similar in the two paths. And so it's just kind of like where you want to spend your time during the day. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's like, how did you know you wanted to be in software or whatever you work in? It's the same kind of thing, where it's like you've seen people in people management positions before. Does that work seem engaging to you? And then I think you can sort of dip your toe in the water and see if it feels right. But yeah, it's a very different kind of reward system.
I think a lot of people think that they make the transition, they can't go back.
Yeah, that's yeah.
I don't know if I want to do it. Like you can always not do it.
It's like ejecting a CRA.
Yeah. Too soon.
I want to get this next one in here. How do you get more women involved into tech leadership? Just looking at the room, it's heavily skewed towards men. This seems to be popular at many conferences, an issue at many conferences. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on this, especially from the women on our team.
Okay, I'll go. So I think that's a complex question, because I feel like here's some stuff that we did at Zapier recently, and I'll tell you, there's no formula. Like there's not a formula for it, because even in this room, there's more men than women in sciences in the tech sector. Like there's a very like societal kind of issue that we have to all sort of work towards. But in the kind of stage of like somebody in their career, there's a few things to do. I think, probably a lot of people have heard around like, make sure you're writing your job descriptions in a way that aren't turning people off, that aren't like, oh, you need 25 years of experience to be a junior engineer, things like that. Like if it's not particularly necessary, don't put it in.
Hey, bro, you think you're tough enough for this job?
Yeah, right, exactly, look at the wording that you're using and how aggressive it is and how drive, execution, very intense words, that turns people off and turns off, women especially will look at a job description and say can I do every single thing on this job description? If I can, I'm not gonna apply. And so really kind of softening that from the start to say okay, I don't know, is one way. Where you source from, super important. Make the time to source from places where women and people of color are wanting to find a job. So there's different job boards, there's different meetups, there's different groups that people are looking at to go, and they're all network, we all network, all the women network to say is this a good place for women to work? And so making sure that you're kind of working within those networks and sourcing in that way. And then I think identifying as you're kind of judging somebody in the hiring process, making sure your hiring process isn't being exclusionary for no reason. You don't have to have a badass hiring process. Nobody's gonna give you points for that. You're just gonna get the same kind of people over and over and over again. So look at that. And then once you're in, once they're folks are in, really providing opportunities. Women generally, unless they have certain personalities, will generally sit back more, will generally not lean in, will generally kind of just want to do their work and do it well and prove themselves. Look at them, see them, give them extra opportunities to kind of be out there and serve leadership roles. If you see a spark, encourage it, continue to encourage it. I think it's fair to put more attention there because it's harder. Just as a woman in tech, it's harder. And so putting attention there is worth it, so.
My short initial answer is fucking promote them. That's it. And I think you hit it on the head. We tend to sit back, we tend to think you and I just sat quietly for a second, really thinking about how we wanted to answer this question. Someone else could have started speaking during that time. And I know I do the same thing. And yeah, this is a hard question to answer. I think also having at least a couple of core female team members who are seen either as strong IC leaders or managers through every step of the hiring process, that the hiring process is built to eliminate implicit bias. I have sat in interviews where people ask, what do you like to do on the weekends? Don't ask that question. Don't do it. It's a terrible idea. It introduces implicit bias in the hiring process. Have a rubric, have a diverse group of people in interviewing, and this is for both new roles as well as hiring internally for a promotion or for an open seat on your team. Same deal. Don't just take word of mouth of one person or two people to slide somebody into a role. Turn it into a slightly more systemized process that can level the playing field for everybody. And then the thing that I like to do is just to build advocacy and alliance groups, especially for diverse people in the workplace. And this could mean a variety of things. This could mean blind team members, this could mean women, this could mean people of color, this could mean people who don't have a computer science background. This could be just any variety of individuals who maybe just don't fit into this archetype that we've all kind of built out in our heads of what a strong technical person looks like. And so I think taking those opportunities and then just starting to see people for who they are, I think can really hoist them up in your minds. And yeah, especially individuals who maybe are extremely strong engineers who they kind of show up, they work, they go home. Maybe they have things going on in their lives outside of work. And I know that for me, it's I always have 5,000 thoughts running through my head of all the shit I gotta get done in my life that is outside of work. And there are a lot of jobs I've had where I was seen more or less as just for lack of a better term, clock puncher. And so I slid under the radar at a lot of companies, even though I felt like I was a super strong IC. Also wasn't the best coder. I still don't think I'm a very good coder. I kind of suck at coding. That's part of why I went into leadership. Is I'm better at the fields and less good at writing enums. And so sure it's a thing. And Yeah.
Yay!
So that that to me was a big one. Just like looking for other ways that people can contribute to a team that's just outside of writing code. See who also is like very personable, asks people how their weekends are, like is willing to step up and help like serve food at a happy hour or something like that. Those small things also add up to a bigger part of the equation over time.
I've been lucky on a couple of my recent teams to have a pretty good, at least gender diverse team. And one of the magic tricks we figured out pretty early on is just actively inviting people from underrepresented groups makes a ton of difference. It's literally the least you could do. But if you just say, hey, we're hiring for this role, I think you should apply. That's like puts a dent towards the like, but I don't fit 100% of the like stated requirements. It's like, cool, well, I'm the hiring manager and I would be very interested in your candidacy. Like that's it's almost like putting a alt text on an image. Like it's so easy, and like just that alone will over time start to introduce a lot more diversity to your team because you'll just have a better pool to work with.
Cool. Well, we're coming up on time, and I want to end on this question. It's not the top one, so forgive me for jumping around a little bit.
You're forgiven.
But a good takeaway, I think, would be any books or particular philosophies that you adhere to in terms of leadership. So just go ahead and shout those out, and any kind of links or anything like that. So go ahead, Cal.
You know, so from a leadership philosophy standpoint, I'm a Simon Sinek guy. So any of the Simon Sinek books I think are great. Like the biggest takeaway I think I've had from those is that like what earns you like a leadership position is when danger is coming towards the tribe, you run toward the danger so that everybody else can get away. From a management standpoint, I'm a hardcore widgets guy. There's a book called Widgets by Rod Wagner. Like that's my management bible. I could have skipped my entire master's degree and just gone off of that book. And I think like at a deeper level, all of that comes from philosophy of W. Edwards Deming, he was a management philosopher and a professor. And like ultimately, this is where we get things like lean and agile and Kanban. All those sort of derive from his original work.
I don't have anything specific. I would say read as much as you can. Like get as many different perspectives as you can. Reach out to as many people who are doing it as you can and just talk to them. Find people to talk to that have stories, that can tell you experiences. Read a bunch of different perspectives on books, management, leadership, tech leadership books, because you'll end up finding your own style from that. But get a diversity of viewpoints because you'll find the nuggets in each one. So.
In terms of like books, like I think the Manager's Path is really good. But like right now I really like Reboot by Jerry Colonna.
Yeah, read that too.
Yeah, it's super good. So just being vulnerable and open. But as terms of like just general advice, like nobody is the villain in their own story, right? Like that person you think is being a real jerk right now thinks that they're right. Like they have a perspective where they are the hero in their story, right? If you can meet them on that level, where you're like, you're wrong and you should feel bad about it, right? Like you're not gonna get anything done, right?
Because they're a villain.
Yeah, right. Just understanding like they think that they're right and like they're justified and like okay, like can I understand that? Can I be like can I wrap my head around that and understand their perspective is an incredible way to like figure out how to resolve like conflict because it is one of those like maybe it's like they broke the build because of some compliance thing, right? But like you're like, how dare they? Right? But then you sit down and like, well here's all the steps like all right. Right, like, and I suck at this. Like, my first reaction is to be like, that person is wrong and they're bad. Right, and like, trying to undo that. Understand that, like, most people are well-intentioned. There's a few sociopaths in any organization, totally. But, like, generally speaking, like, most people are just trying to do their job, right? And, like, if you can, like, come with that, like, level of empathy, like all sorts of doors, like, unlock real fast.
There are a couple books I like to consume. Anything by Brene Brown I read voraciously and commit to memory, and I have a lot of good cathartic cries as I read the books. Can't go wrong with a good cry. Also the book Crucial Conversations, which somebody stole my copy of and I don't know where it is. I need to track them down. But that book really changed my liminal thinking around just dealing with people, to kind of Steve's point of always assume good intentions. Now it's completely changed how I do difficult conversations with people. I assume they're coming from a place of compassion or self-interest that isn't the kind of self-interest where you shit on everyone to get what you want, and that sort of thing. Also, like, killer Spotify playlists to build hype keep me going big time. Like, I have a couple different ones of female empowerment songs, and then I have one that's just nothing but like weird crazy gangster rap. And whenever I am feeling like a little bit crappy, like, I have my hype playlists. And then there's a podcast I listen to called Rich Roll, and it's a dude who is a triathlete who became like an author and does all this crazy crap. But his episodes are like 2.5 hours long, and he interviews these extremely influential people in society, everything from like gurus to athletes to startup founders. Like the guy who started WeWork was a recent interviewee, all these different things. And they talk about self-empowerment, actualization, awareness, building community, all these different facets that have major crossovers with our industry and the things that people want to do. And that's given me a lot of perspective in terms of the work that I do, and given me some good self-reflection points.
I think that Morgan and I share the same bookshelf, but I'll start with, if you're in a transition role, what got you here won't get you there. That's a really good one. There's a book called The Art of Possibility. So if you're a knower like I am, it's nice to be able to frame things in terms of, there are other perspectives and there's different narratives. And
With that one too, the audiobook is key.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, because like with that one, like when he's talking about the like classical like pieces, they'll play it in the background.
Oh.
Yeah, the audiobook for Art of Possibility is.
So the challenge I've got with that is when if I do an audiobook, I have Rex. So I prefer to read. I may listen to that,
Yeah.
On long, boring drives with the family. And then, so if you read those two, and then now you're in sort of a leadership position, Brene Brown's Born to Lead is if you're going to read one Brene Brown, that's probably the best one, because it gives you an introduction to a lot of her older stuff, but then goes into what you do with it right now as a leader. It actually, I started having my direct reports because I'm a leader of leaders most of the time at this point. I have them read that, so we have a common language that we can use as we're dealing with things, whether it's armoring up or it's, we need to rumble about something. It just diffuses the situation so that you can have those hard conversations about things, so you don't get the big trepidatious fear walking in. So I'll just leave with those three. If you read those three, you probably know pretty good.
Art of Possibility is like a life hack. Like once you read that book, it's like life is on easy mode.
Yeah. Your pain level goes down. Your daily pain level goes down once you start thinking in terms of that book.
Yeah.
Awesome. If anybody got a list of those books, I want it at the end because that sounds awesome. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate all the questions. Would love to hear your feedback on this kind of format, whether you like it or not. It's kind of something new we're trying. Also, round of applause for speakers, but also for yourselves because you are all leaders. Hopefully you've heard that theme here tonight. No matter where you are.